what is the absolute worst way to use ChatGPT?
There is a buzzword, maybe you've heard about it, context engineering. If the first mistake was to give it too much context, and the second mistake would be to not give it enough. The challenge that I observe with myself is that it's just too good, it's too powerful, and I like to use it as a shortcut for thinking about the kind of problems I have that would make my brain hurt, which they should, because that's how we learn.
How should people think about AI as a collaborator?
Think about it as your little minions. Think about yourself as the manager. I would not let it run with it and like build on top this nonsensical cathedral. It's probably founded on nothing.
It's really difficult because on the one hand, that means we have this incredibly powerful tool. Overall, output went up with the AI group by 12.5%. The quality of submissions around 40%. That's massive. But also we have this peril of, just using it as shortcuts, and then we lose our own agency. 83% of ChatGPT users couldn't recall what they had written in their previous essays. Given every AI we interact with is the worst AI we ever will interact with, will we all lose our jobs? Will we get replaced?
Welcome to Balance and Breakthrough, the brand new podcast. I'm your host, Noah, a PhD student at Imperial Business School in London. Now, we live through pretty chaotic times, and this podcast exists to both help you nurture balance to stay steady, as well as to help you pursue breakthroughs in your life, your work, and in the world. In this debut episode, I sit down with my buddy Marcel, who is doing a PhD in computer science, and we talk everything AI. We talk about the worst ways to use AI, but also how to leverage it to get smarter, more creative, and more productive, looking at studies coming out of Harvard, Wharton, and MIT. But there is a downside to overusing AI, and that is using it as a shortcut, because it can literally shut down our brain and lead to brain rot, as we'll cover. The key takeaway, instead of using it as a shortcut and using it on autopilot, we can use AI to augment our intelligence. Now, if you like this episode, and it's our very first one, so hopefully it's the worst I'll ever do, but if you like it, consider subscribing, hitting the like button, sharing in the comments how you have been using AI differently and what kind of strategies you want to adopt and found most useful, and share it with a friend. Thank you, and enjoy the first episode.
I'm really nervous and really excited, and I'm honored to and super happy to welcome my very dear friend, best buddy, fellow PhD student, Marcel Gregoriadis, for this first episode, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Noah. The honor is on my side. I'm also nervous. If you find any comfort in the thoughts, if you think about it, this is supposed to be the worst podcast you'll ever make, right? Because it's supposed to be better. You learn a lot here, and for me, it's also the first conversation that gets recorded, so it's a weird experience, but we go through that together.
Yeah, we have some. That's really well put. I think. Let's hope it's going to be the worst podcast we both have ever done. But yeah, let's assume no one is really listening. And if so, it's just friends and family for now. Maybe. Yeah. So, but let's give them a good show, shall we? We, like normal non-computer scientist people, hear the word AI all the time. Maybe LLMs, large language models, but I'm catching myself, and often I don't really understand. If you had to explain it to me as a non-techie, as if I was a 10-year-old, I have a little bit of understanding. I've seen what it does, but I don't know how it works. How would you explain? And then we can go in the technical sort of exciting computer science stuff after that. But what's an LLM, and at the simplest level, how does it work?
Basically, I think the simplest, maybe most applicable way of thinking about an LLM is a next token predictor. And a token would be...
What's a token?
Great question. Most of the time it's a word or a part of a work of a word. For example,
Right.
viewing would probably translate into two tokens, view and in, because in occurs frequently enough in the global corpus of data that it would create a distinct token. And an LLM would predict, conditioned on the previous sequence, so that's your context, the next token.
Right. So the next word. Is it too simple to say LLMs or large language models, they basically ingested all the books, articles, videos, content on the internet and tokenized, so created so for example, the word cat could be token 56 or something, right? So it's lots and lots of tokens. And it tries to understand, it's basically having a good understanding of how human language works, right? Because it's trained on human language and it predicts the next word. But if I'm not mistaken, it's not as simple as just predicting the next word in like a very mechanical way, because otherwise it would make a lot of mistakes. But I guess a good example is if I would give an LLM the sentence, the cat is on the, and then what's the next word?
Probably
Tree or like mats, or maybe on a roof. That's less likely.
Yeah.
But probably it won't say on a rocket ship, right?
Probably. I use the word probably because there is some intentional variability to it. Otherwise, it would create the same things deterministically every single time when you type in that sequence. So there would be like the temperature parameter, for example. That's like,
What's the temperature parameter?
I think intuitively you can think about it like an LLM's creativity with its token prediction. So I'd not always pick the highest ranking token regarding its probability, but
right, it wouldn't say all the time. If you ask it, the cat is on, it wouldn't say the mat all the time or the tree all the time. It would sometimes, maybe if, you change the context and you talk about, imagine a sci-fi movie, right? And then you say the cat is on, and then maybe because it has this other context in mind, it would vary, or even in the very simple sentence, it would sometimes say tree, sometimes say mat, sometimes say couch, and then but still that's a very simplistic understanding of LLMs, because normal language models before, like pre-ChatGPT, and where all of a sudden large language models were able to do almost magical stuff, where everyone was kind of like amazed at how non-robotic it sounds and how human it sounds and how, like how much output it can give. Like if you say, write me an essay on topic X, right? It's much more, if you just predict the next word, it would maybe form coherent sentences, but it's somehow able to write an entire logical essay, just like from like a very simple prompt with very little context. So do you want to go deeper into how like the scientific breakthroughs that allowed the LLMs to do that? Or you have anything else that we need to understand before going there?
Not necessarily. I just wanted to add that really is the magic, because the LLM didn't think and plan to write an essay and to arrive at certain conclusions. It just started writing. That's not the case for thinking models. That's not the case for the application of agents, as we've seen that this year. But if you think about basic text generation, it doesn't have this internal thinking process in a way a human might have.
Right.
It is surprising and impressive that it leads to good outcomes.
Right. But what's the thing about, the scientific breakthroughs and how they're built nowadays compared to pre-ChatGPT and those, consumer-facing models that made that possible.
Yeah. Oh, for that, I'd like to say that I'm not exactly in the field of AI. I work on distributed systems, but I apply AI and machine learning like many people do. So I don't have the deeper technical insights that a machine learning person would have. But the innovation that changed the entire course in an exponential with an exponential effect is the Attention is All You Need paper from 2017. That so the intuition here was that the way how it would work before, for example, is you would have this variable context and you would try to predict the next token maybe based on the
What do you mean by variable context?
The length of in terms of tokens would be variable, right? It would always be.
You can have a short sentence or
it can be a
longer sentence.
Right.
Right.
And so basically what the attention mechanism, that's the intuition that got introduced in this paper, would do is it would internally learn to what token to put attention to. Because previously we would think about very simplistically that the last token in the sequence is the most important one. The previous one is maybe only half as important, and you have this decaying gradient, which would have the effect that you had very fast context rot, which is a term that is currently getting on vogue again, and you couldn't have.
Okay, context rot would be that you get an output, but because the machine learning algorithm only predicts the next word, knowing the one before, it's a bit like chance whispers that, you start with an intention, but
it runs all pretty quickly.
Yeah. And you get something, you lose the context and all the nuance from the beginning quite quickly because it's kind of lost in translation, or it forgets. Can we say that? It kind of forgets what
precisely. Yeah, that's precisely it. And that makes it very difficult to generalize from large corpora of texts, from books, etc.
Right. And or why? What's the problem with? So probably those older models, they would have been pretty good at saying the cat is on the mat, because that's quite easy to. But what would that same model have struggled at? So you give it the book, and or what kind of task? Where was the limit?
I'm a little bit speculating. Yeah, I want to give that as a disclaimer, but I would say that it would be able to finish sentences on a level of grammar and language syntax, etc. But these greater achievements of what seems like logical reasoning,
right?
It's just, this approach wouldn't scale to a degree where it would have these emerging properties,
right?
That allows LLMs nowadays to complete difficult tasks.
Right. What I remember from a machine learning class that I'm just taking is that this breakthrough had something to do with what's called multi-head attention.
Yes, that's an attention mechanism. And
could you explain that, like in simple terms?
Only to the extent that I can, which is that so each neural network would have a specific architecture,
right?
And this architecture can be composed of multiple components. For example, which was introduced in this paper, attention heads, and you would have multiple attention heads that would learn different aspects, we could say, about how to weigh attention on different words.
Okay, so kind of to pick up on that, I think a way a professor tried to explain that, because I couldn't wrap my head around it, was, imagine you were at a party, and like we humans, we pay attention to lots of things, right? We see stuff, we hear stuff, we have an awareness of who is in the room, who is talking, how people are standing, how loud the music is. So it's, I think the way he said it was, imagine you're at the party and you look, one head is looking at who is talking. And another attention head is how loud is the music. And then another attention head is what's the topic of the conversation. And then another attention head would be what did we talk about before? So is it another topic? Is it, are we, is this, building off of what has been said? Maybe another attention head is how do I feel right now? Right. Mm-hmm. And somehow, I mean, we cannot really explain it with our human brain, but somehow we pay attention to all of these things.
Yeah.
And somehow we then determine, should we talk? Should we not talk? But we can have all these things, quote unquote, in our minds, mm-hmm. and follow a conversation and then intelligently kind of contribute. That makes sense with like nuance and in the context, and you're at a party, so you understand the context. You wouldn't start talking about something super technical from work, and if you do, you're like, oh, this is really weird, or like he's socially awkward. So somehow we learned that, and I guess that's what LLMs do. It's hard to figure out how exactly they do it, but that's kind of the intuition of the multi-head attention model. If I didn't, completely butcher that.
No, that's a great way of thinking about it, for sure.
Okay. Something, I mean, just to add on that, and I think that we went enough in the weeds, and we can talk about how we should best use AI, but maybe one last technical thing you can try to explain to us, for those machine learning algorithms to get it right and pay enough attention to context, but not too much, and to grammar, and to so if you take that metaphor, right, you could have a sentence that could pick up on the topic and grammatical structures and tone, and there could be lots and lots of things going on. And I know that there's something like weights or parameters mm-hmm. in those machine learning algorithms that determine how much attention to pay to what. How can we think about that? Have we figured that out, or is the machine learning algorithm just finding the weights themselves, and we have as humans, we look at that, we're like no clue of like what that is and how it came up with that?
That's precisely it. That's the beauty of neural networks. In the end, it's all about, we have a problem. We have a very complex problem, and we have an input, we have an output, and we have something in between. We have a magic function in between. It is, yes, a black box. And a language is a great example for a very complex algorithm. Like we could not, we tried, in fact, Google Translate, I've heard, there used to be a team of more than 1,000 engineers who would manually, with thousands of lines of codes, try to build an algorithm that would convert input text into output text of different languages.
Like from English to another language, like,
yes,
I don't know, German.
Yeah. And if you know anything about language, it's not that, it's extremely difficult to make that work.
Right. You cannot translate word for word. Different words have a slightly different meaning. The grammatical structure, the ordering of articles, etc. Right.
So much. So the idea of a neural network is there must be a function that approximates how an input should be converted to an output. We don't know how, but we give it maybe 1 million of parameters. So the neural network is one big mathematical expression with millions, sometimes billions or trillions of parameters, and we don't know their value. But we allow the neural network through massive amounts of training, where we show them, hey, for this input, this is how the output should look like. For that input, this is how the output should look like. We allow
like there's that's supervised. That they call that supervised learning, right? We would give a machine learning an output, write an essay on topic X, and then as humans, we would, in the training phase, we'd go in and be like, we like this answer, we don't like this answer, and the algorithm would go back and do better, right?
Yeah. For each time when the actual output diverges from the expected output, we would tune the parameters in the neural network in a way where it would decrease we call it loss. So the difference between the expected output and the actual output.
Okay.
So we would tune these little parameters for every single training sample or every batch of training samples, and hopefully over time approximate a function that's what a machine learning network is in the end, a function that could relatively accurately predict to new inputs and give good outputs, the desired outputs.
Okay, that's fascinating. I think I remember reading that ChatGPT, the original ChatGPT, was trained to have 185 or 175 billion different weights. I mean, we cannot even start to fathom that number, but it just goes to show that it's so complex.
Yeah. It's just the idea that there is a mathematical expression, but it's too complex. We don't know the parameters, so we learn a function that approximates those to a degree where hopefully we get sensible outputs.
Okay, that's so fascinating. Speaking about outputs, how do you? So now we talked about all the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts. Of course, surface level, but to get a bit of a better grasp on how LLM works. If I had to ask you, what is the absolute worst way to use ChatGPT? What does that look like? And I guess many of us will do exactly those things quite regularly.
Yeah. One thing that would come to my mind is to use a single chat for everything.
Okay. Why is that bad?
It comes down to context throughout. We simply have seen that as the context grows, the dumber the model gets. It's not only that it cannot pick up on old things in your chat, but also it gets confused. We can think about it as noise. There's too much noise in the context for the model to. It will make simple logical errors. We have seen performance degradations. So ideally, for each new task, you would want to open a new chat.
Right.
That's one.
So that's like mistake and lesson number one. So context is important, and it can only hold, right? It has only so much memory, and it's or tokens that it can use. But also, if you have too many different tasks, it's really confused, right? It's like it's as if I think we can appreciate that in our own lives if we jump from reading something to then answering a WhatsApp text to then watching something on YouTube on something unrelated. And then someone asks us to help with their, they have a problem with their code. And then we go back to what we read at the beginning, and we try to write something intelligent about that. Maybe I have to write an essay. Like our brain just feels kind of clogged, right? And we're overwhelmed by so much different task switching. Maybe that doesn't apply fully, but it kind of, shifts the context too much.
It applies to an extent. However, it is also true that you could be working on one coherent project, let's say, performance would still degrade.
Still go down. So that's mistake number one. Mistake number two, worst thing to do with AIs.
Well, if the first mistake was to give it too much context, then the second mistake would be to not give it enough context. That's a contradiction. Explain. There is a buzzword, maybe you've heard about it, context engineering. That's what people like.
That's the latest.
Yeah. I
think the models have gone so good that it's less about the words that you use and more about the context that you create.
Yeah, it seems to me that that's a fancy new term for, at least in the beginning in my field in engineering, we called it vibe coding.
Right.
And context engineering makes it sound a bit more sophisticated as an association.
So what would give us an example for bad context, and in the same context, like how would you do a better job?
I could not confirm that, but a colleague told me about an interesting study that computer scientists are the best at prompting. So that's interesting, and I think the reason is because as a computer programmer, you are trained to be very precise with your instructions that you give to a computer, because a computer can only interpret what you give it. And so I think people, especially with this technology, they observe that with myself, they like to take shortcuts. They don't want to think anymore for themselves. They want the machine to like figure it out. But yeah, the more thinking you put into it, the more you curate this prompt, the better the model can make an intelligent answer.
Right. I think one metaphor, one of our teachers, recent PhD graduate who studied, AI and large language models from the social science side of things, but quite into weeds of things. He said, think about curating the context as if you are role playing. So it's not just, so think of the persona that you want the AI to embody. And as you quote unquote speak with it and have a conversation, you want it to get what you want to create. So I guess it's a bit like you're like the film director, and you think about the set and the different characters, and apparently it's good if you just quote unquote role play with it, because it can develop a theory of mind and then answer in that way. So one thing you could do is, say you have a creative and entrepreneurial idea, and you say correct me if I'm wrong, the bad way or the worst way to do it is ask ChatGPT or Claude, what do you think of my idea, my business idea? A better way to do it is, imagine I've just pitched this idea at Dragon's Den or Shark Tank in the US, and you're one of the judges that would put their money for equity into my company. What would their feedback be? What would their questions be?
Yeah.
What would their concerns be? I think, is that a good way to think about vibe coding or context engineering?
I think you're making a different point. My point was AI cannot read your thoughts yet. But you're also alluding to something very interesting. To that, I would also like to add that one must not forget that these companies are companies. They're competing for your attention. They want you to enjoy using their products, so they will comfort you. So you have this confirmation bias here. So by setting this,
that's a really good. Yeah, that's a really good one, because it will always say, "Oh wow, this is $1 million idea." You can nudge it to be a bit more critical. It will ask, but it will be like, "Oh, you have a $1 million idea on your hands, and you're so brilliant, and this draft is so amazing." And because that's using that technical prompt, it's in the LLM's system prompt to be, to increase consumer engagement, right?
Yeah, exactly. What many colleagues here in the lab would do before submitting a paper is asking ChatGPT, telling it, you're a critical reviewer for this conference, so they review this paper. So that's exactly what you said.
Right. So you give it, again, going back to the role playing, you try to give it a quite specific context, right? To be able to give you much better answers than just generic. So what's the lesson here? Try to be specific, like don't be generic when prompting.
Be specific, provides the context that the answering of your question requires. Don't ask suggestive questions. Try to keep it neutral, and I think this role playing concept is a good method. In the end, ChatGPT is nothing else, or Claude Code, all these different LLMs, they have a system prompt. So they have OpenAI and these companies telling the language model, you're ChatGPT, you're a helpful assistant, you're super nice to people, yada yada.
I want to dive into both the do's and the don'ts, not just from a how to prompt, but when should we use? How should we use? For which tasks should we use AIs? What's the pros and cons? What are your thoughts on AI for productivity, for creativity, idea generation, criticizing things? What of this, from your experience, how should people think about a bit more meta? How should they think about AI as a collaborator?
Mm-hmm. I think in that regard, I will repeat what many have said. Think about it as your little minions. Think about yourself as the manager. What I like to say is that these LLMs, they work really, really, really well for simple tasks. Like I told you that before, right? I read that in a journal. What was it? Fabrication, distillation, and summarization. I guess those are the three. So LLMs excel at that naturally. That is, whenever you have a PDF and you don't feel like reading everything, and you want to find relevant text blocks that maybe do not require too much logical reasoning, perform very well here. Summarizing text will perform very well.
How do you think about that? Is it all positive, or what's the right ways to use it, and maybe some of the dangers?
Well, I think that the challenge that I observe with myself is that it's just too good, it's too powerful, and I like to use it as a shortcut for thinking about the kind of problems I have that would make my brain hurt, which they should, because that's how we learn, that's how we understand truly. So often I'm naturally in my job, I'm thinking about complex and new things, and I would maybe rely too much, or when I'm coding, when I'm writing software, I would rely too much on the LLM and let it do things without truly checking what it did, and I would find myself walking against a wall in the end. So that is something, shortcutting hard thought processes or learning experiences.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head, because I came across a study in Ethan Mollick's book called Co-Intelligence. I think the subtitle is Working and Living with AI. Highly recommended. It's, with things developing so quickly, it's from 2023, so some of that stuff will be outdated. But just to go back to your point of, shortcut and then hitting the brick wall, because it's not that simple, right? Because you need to know, when can I take the shortcut? When should I take the shortcut? Where is the brick wall? And a really interesting study I thought was, you might have heard about this one, mostly from authors at Harvard Business School and Wharton in collaboration with BCG, one of the top 3 global strategy consulting firms. And they did a field experiment back in, I believe, 2022 or 23, giving 758 consultants different treatments. So some of them were allowed to use AI, and the others, they thought they had an 18 sort of question business development. I think it was about developing a new shoe factory or something. And they had to think about many things: the marketing, the how to execute, how to design, and so they thought they're working on a real project. They didn't know that they're in an experiment. And so some didn't have AI. And actually, what is quite interesting, what do you think happens? And then
I think it depends on the task, which group was more productive, but I can easily say that I can easily see how there would be cases where the group that was not allowed, right, to use AI would perform better in complex tasks.
Right, you're right. So in most tasks, so I think 16 or 17 of those were simpler, and overall the output went up with the AI group by 12.5%, I believe. The quality of submissions around 40%. That's massive. And the speed at which these tasks were executed at 25%. So AI was clearly better. And what is really exciting about this was that if you have the previously top 50 performers and you compare them to the bottom 50 performers within BCG, the people that were previously worse at the track record, they got much better. I think they got something like a 47% gain in productivity, whereas the already very productive or top 50% got something like 17%. I might be butchering those numbers, but it was kind of a skill leveler, which is, I think, a takeaway is do use AI. I mean, it will make you more productive. It's an amazing tool if done correctly or used correctly. But here's the caveat. So there was quite a tricky question where that was set up in a way to mislead the AI, and you needed to think really critically. And when it came to that question, the group that didn't have the AI performed 20% better. So 20% of the people that were not allowed to use the AI fell in that trap and answered correctly. And what is more shocking is that of the AI group, they were also asked, to which degree they just copy and pasted answers without, checking the output and modifying the output. 87% of the people that just copy and pasted also just, let AI answer this really difficult question and got it wrong. So I think the balance act is know when it's a simple question, but always check the answers. Like, would you have done the same thing? Do you have any way to challenge it? Maybe reiterate, go a bit back and forth. Don't just mindlessly plug, copy and paste and just plug it in. Because if you're always interacting with it, you will see when there's something that actually, you need to think about it. And where even AI is reaching its limits, and that's where, you need to use your brain and think hard. So I guess that's don't fall asleep at the wheel lesson from that study. But yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
It's difficult. It goes a little bit against human nature. We're lazy. We will take the shorter path whenever we get the opportunity. And I think we need to watch ourselves. So maybe it's maybe we're all in the process of learning how to use AI, and we will change our approach. We learn like as a global society, I think, still how to interact with it and when.
Right. I think another really interesting point that came out of that, touching on what you said, we're figuring out together how to use that, including in organizations. And for me, studying management and organizations for the next 5 years in my PhD, an interesting point from that study as well was individually, people's answers were more creative than compared to the group that didn't have AI. But if you looked at the whole organization or all the people's output that didn't use AI and all the people's output that did use AI, the diversity of answers was lower in the AI group. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's another danger. If you can be individually more productive and individually more creative, but if you just run with the first best answer, you are collectively less creative because, of course, it's a statistical model. So it will give you, it'll give you like the answers, and maybe it will, if not prompted correctly, fall into groupthink. If you just give it the task, here's what I have to do, it will come up with standard answers. So you have to parallel at the organizational level that you get suboptimal outcomes if you're just on autopilot.
Well, I think that's a little bit the idea of agents, because you have multiple LLMs, maybe with different personas, different levels of creativity, and you let them think and confer together. And studies have shown that you get higher factual accuracy, for example, if you just let LLMs talk to each other, which is not obvious that it would.
Right.
But I would say
Okay, so
that maybe the human group would exhibit higher creativity or diversity of outputs because they had different personas, different experiences, different capabilities, different creativity.
yeah.
We're
It's still quite
that's with agents.
it's still quite shocking on this idea of creativity. I mean, that really got me a bit thinking. So in the same book, discussing creativity, it was and remember, this was not agents, none of that fancy stuff of these days. This was ChatGPT 2023. It tried to test the creativity, and it used the regular creativity test, which is the alternative use test, I think it's called. So I ask you, think for 2 minutes, what are ways I could use a toothbrush, which is not brushing my teeth? And humans come up with about 5 to 10 answers in a minute or two. Give it to ChatGPT, and it produces something like 120 answers, and like many of them very not obvious, right? So if prompted correctly, it can go places which are really exciting, right? And it can give you as an individual another idea. And they even put that to the test. Well, is it just quantity of ideas, or are the ideas better? And Ethan Mollick reported of a sort of it's not a study, but a class at Wharton in innovation and entrepreneurship. And it was 200 students against ChatGPT. And they would need to produce an item that costs below 50 pounds it's dollars for students. And they selected the 40 best ideas to go for, to be considered for investments or something. You want to take a guess how many of those ideas that, from the human jury made it in the final round, and how many from ChatGPT?
Out of 50, that would be
40.
40. How many ChatGPT
business ideas that were judged by human investors on their, potential to actually be successful?
Sorry, I have to get this right. So we have 50 student propositions, and do we also have 50 AI business models?
Oh, I don't know that. I don't know what the quantity they went in.
Okay.
But it was 200 students against one ChatGPT. I don't know.
Okay.
I think they were in groups.
Well, I want to say that
but I think they probably submitted the same amount. Let's assume they submitted the same amount.
Sure. I want to think it's not only ChatGPT. It might be maybe some, but I think there will also be some human students that I cannot express it in a percentage. Maybe 50-50. I want to say more human outweighed ChatGPT, hopefully.
I wish there was the response. It's 35 ChatGPT versus 5 that were human. So
was it bachelor students?
No, it was MBA students at Wharton.
Oh,
so the best business class in the world, and a really, an entrepreneurship class where actual companies came out. So
that's surprising.
Yeah, that's really surprising and shocking. It's like, well, are we, it's really difficult, because on the one hand, that means we have this incredibly powerful tool that could replace us, and we can talk about that. But also we have this peril of, just using it as shortcuts, and then we lose our own agency. Did you hear about that MIT study that very recently came out, the brain on ChatGPT? It made huge waves. It's a small study. It's not peer reviewed yet, but
you'll have to remind me.
So it was. Let me check so that I get this right. I think it was 58 students in the Boston area between 18 and 39. And they were split in 3 groups. So one of them they used ChatGPT for all. It was 20-minute essay writing. One was allowed to use ChatGPT, one was allowed to Google, and one had to do, brain only. And they looked at the brain activity and the quality of the output and how well people remembered what they did, and if they could redo it. You want to take any hot guess at what they found? I mean, again, we're both PhD students, not peer-reviewed, small sample size, but spoiler, it's quite interesting results. You want to take any hot guess?
Well, I think it seems quite obvious that the brain activity would decline the more tools you have at your hands, thinking tools. So Google, and then even more with ChatGPT.
Right. What about the quality of the output?
I see. What was the task again?
They wrote 4 essays. So they wrote 3 essays, and then after some time, they wrote the 4th essay without the tool. It was on a similar. So for example, the group that was allowed to use AI was not allowed to use it anymore.
I think you would probably tell me that the group that had access to ChatGPT found better.
Perform better?
Yes.
Yeah. So they had better quality output than the group that didn't use or didn't have AI. So, but teachers, there was 2 teachers that graded that. They also described the output as soulless. But the really shocking part. So you were spot on with the brain activity. To quote, ChatGPT users had the lowest brain engagement and consistently underperformed at neural, linguistic, and behavioral levels. Brain connectivity, to quote, systematically scaled down with the amount of external support. Brain-only group exhibited the strongest, widest ranging networks, and search engine group showed intermediate engagement. And what was interesting is, so that's one part. That's already shocking, but probably not surprising. But what I got really concerned about was, and many people did, it was all over the internet, that 83% of ChatGPT users couldn't recall what they had written in their previous essays.
Yeah.
They couldn't recall the main points. Yeah. And they couldn't reconstruct their arguments. So they couldn't remember their key points. So you produce better output that looks better, but you don't remember what you did. And it checks out. I remember sometimes me, if I had to do something quick and dirty, I would just do it. And I if you had asked me what did you write in there, I wouldn't be able to tell. And
Yeah.
the terrible thing and the kind of the concept, or yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, you were not really there when you wrote it. That's why you don't
Right.
remember.
Right. And the crazy thing is that when you go back to not using the tool, not just do you not remember what you wrote, but your ability to write goes down. Right. And actually the best performing group, and this is again, we're trying to have nuance. The best performing group was the one that only wrote the 3 essays by hand with their own brain. And then in the last round, they were allowed to use ChatGPT, and they had the highest brain connectivity of all groups.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the best essays at the end. So I think the lesson here is start with your own brain. It should, like you said it, like it should hurt. It should be uncomfortable. It should, like if the brain hurts, it means there's something happening. And then once you have formed your argument or you formed your idea and you thought about it, bring in ChatGPT, because it will make your writing better. It will correct your grammatical mistakes. It will help you with structure. Maybe it'll help you, refine sentences or flow, or have another idea. But you will remember what you wrote, and you will produce better output. And I guess that's a good way to think about it. Anything else that you want to add that surprises you, shocks you, that we should think about given all of these quite concerning but also quite inspiring studies?
I think you captured it quite well and comprehensively. Using ChatGPT the right amount.
Right. Is it just the right amount, or is it I guess at the right stage? At the right stages, so order matters. So you, yeah.
It's hard to say because also a thing that AI is really good at is prototyping. We love here to use it for prototyping software, especially in science where every paper is kind of we build something then we throw it away. A business plan, you might have said, brainstorming about maybe a podcast script. So I cannot really give a conclusive strategy of when to use it, but you need to do the hard work at some point, some step.
So you need to do the hard work. But let's say I wanted to use it. I want to brainstorm. Maybe I need to, like let's say, I mean, taking back this study from Wharton with the MBA students, where ChatGPT was just better at, more creative at creating business plans. So how would do you have any strategy for how to get the most? Let's say you want to use it. How do you get the most out of your ChatGPT in terms of prompt engineering, apart from just context? So let's say we set the context right, but I guess there's ways to get the AI to think harder as well. Do you have any tips for?
Well, maybe the way I use it whenever I have a complex problem to which I don't know the answer, is I try to do the hard work, and often that goes with writing, right? You don't really understand what you're thinking until you've written it down. So I'm trying to like write down my thought process, and kind of have this conversation with myself, like, oh yeah, this will not work because of that. And I have a little manuscript of my thinking process, and once I hit a wall, I would copy that as it is into the ChatGPT box and post my question, and then let it think. And then maybe based on the answer, I would revise my manuscript in a new chat, or like edit my chat message and let it hear the answer again. And I think if I, from the beginning, would have written in the chatbot instead of in my notes, I would have taken the easier way already. I would not have done the thinking. But you need to do it. Otherwise, you get lazy with your prompt.
Right.
And if you get lazy with your prompt, you're not giving the AI the context it needs.
It needs. Also, you don't know when the AI goes wrong or where it makes a logical mistake, because if you did the hard work and the logical step-by-step thinking through the process yourself, you can, because that's exactly the danger, right? If you when you make a mistake when it counts most, it doesn't matter that you had that productivity gain because you had a huge mistake.
That's why I also try to go step by step with the AI. So usually it would give me a huge answer, propose I do like a probably over complex methodology. And I would maybe pick one thing, use it to refine my query, and repost it. I would not let it run with it and like build on top this nonsensical cathedral. It's probably founded on nothing. So
right. So it's like, for a metaphor, you want the AI to build parts of the cathedral, and then you're the architect, right? And you're like, do I like this part? Is it a right size? Is this a good stone? Go back. Oh, now I'm happy. Now we can build on that. So it's like you're still the architect instead of just letting it, because AI could do that. It could just give you the whole house, but then you're like, oh,
and it will do.
I don't like the windows. I don't like the walls. I don't like the color that you chose. That's it's better to be the human in the loop at every intermediary step, right?
It reminds me. Yes, if you prompt it, it will give you the whole house with a garden and a car. It reminds me of the lean startup methodology, and I also see it with well, you want to do the, I guess that's my interpretation. You want the minimum amount of work. You want to add the minimum amount of complexity to move forward with your problem. And I observed that a lot with making code is it will do too much. Like it will write too much code, and you cannot overlook the complexity of the code when it grows, especially when you let AI build these parts, which are sometimes unnecessary.
Right. That's also an important lesson because, I mean, they're so smart. If we want to, stay on top, it's important to understand what it's doing along the way. I think also a good way that I came across for really simple stuff, and it works for complex stuff as well, to even though you just give it one step of the problem, you let it think harder before giving you that output for that step. So very simple example. I had to choose a bank because I relocated to the UK, and I didn't want to do the hard work of figuring out what banks are there, what are their fees, what are their perks, what are the footnotes. I knew I wanted one that is not too unsustainable, but that it doesn't cost so much, or has no fees, that has a good budgeting function, and nice interface, and no or low transaction fees and withdrawal fees if I travel abroad, right? These were my criteria. So I came up with that. I was like, this is what I want. I told ChatGPT, no, Claude. I became a bigger fan of Claude, actually. For everyone listening, no product placement, but ChatGPT is more creative, quote unquote, and it tends to hallucinate more. So if you're in science and you value accuracy, do due diligence and check. But back to my example, I didn't just tell it my criteria. I gave it the context, right, and the criteria. But then what I said was, give me a list. So step one, give me a list of 5 to 10 banks. Criticize your own list in step 2 and narrow it down to 5 banks. And then based on that list of 5, do pros and cons for each of the choices that you give me. And then land on 1 or 2 final options and explain me why I should choose them. And it was kind of amazing because you don't just get a list, because you force it to think and to reflect on its own answers and apply logic and do it sequentially and, with the pros and cons or plus or minus, it gives you a much more robust output. And I actually, the one I'd recommended is the one I settled for in the end. And this is I think a shortcut that I'd happily take, right? It's not an essay that I write. It's not a really, I don't have to tell anyone a logical consequence. It's just a nuisance to look through all the sites, understand the costs, look at all the fine print. So that's and you can apply the same sort of framework to whatever, I want to create a clean tech startup, or I want to create a whatever food shop, or just a company, and you tell it, give me 50 options. Critique your list of 50 companies and narrow it down to 15. Give me a pro and con list of why it would work or why it wouldn't work, and then narrow it down to 5 options I can ponder, and then you take it from there. I think that's a very very powerful way to prompt AI. So no matter the domain, from super simple to building businesses or coding and doing research.
Again, agent idea, right? That's what we discovered pretty much throughout 2025.
So you mentioned the word agent several times. I'll define what's an agent for anyone listening.
It's really nothing else than a large language model. But it becomes an agent if you use it in the context of LLMs communicating with each other or building a pipeline of LLMs. What you would usually also do is you would have LLMs with different capabilities. They can distinguish themselves in many ways, have a different system prompt, have access to different data and resources. Maybe some do deep thinking, maybe some don't. There's also the element of cost versus accuracy trade-off you want to balance. And like this, you can build quite sophisticated pipelines, similarly to how you described it. You described task decomposition, a very powerful tool,
right?
Packed from the agent world.
Didn't know how it was called.
Yeah, but that was exactly it. You made a plan and you let individual, I call it agents, but LLMs work on these. There's also the idea of letting multiple LLMs work on the same task and then aggregate those through conflict resolution mechanisms or voting or conferring or dialogue to come to a better output.
Right. If people wanted to use agents, and what's a simple way to do it?
in a way, in a more manual way, we're doing it already by choosing the right model for our task. Right? We
let it
oscillate between, yes, within ChatGPT, we have a selection of models, but sometimes we might go to Claude or Grok or Gemini for different tasks.
Right. We didn't talk about that. Yeah, you could ask the same question to different chatbots. They have different flavors and different characters, right? Gemini, you have Claude, you have Grok, you have ChatGPT. They're all geared. They have different strengths and different. They excel at slightly different things. And if you have the same task, you can give it to some of the different LLMs. You can let them, if you pay for it, let them think hard. The output does get better. And for example, if you cycle between Claude and then you ask the question to Claude, you give it the output, then you paste the output from Claude to Gemini and ask Gemini, what do you think of Claude's output regarding, answer or task X? And you do that back and forth, you get really, you can refine stuff quite a lot. And you manually, right, let them sequentially think and refine output. I guess that's a good.
Even this sequential problem-solving approach, but also already you choosing the right model for your task is in a way choosing the specialized LLM that matches your task.
Right. Maybe going really, really broad and asking questions we don't really have answers to, but we can hypothesize. Given how creative those machines are, given they get better, I think they double in processing speed every 4 months or 4 to 6 months. Given every AI we interact with is the worst AI we ever will interact with, given how creative they already are at, doing business plans, writing essays. Now there's these agentic AIs that could do the entire thing. You just tell it build a house, and it will build a metaphorical house. Will we all lose our jobs? Will we get replaced? Is this the inflection point where it's different than other technological revolutions and we have to fear for our jobs? Even Nobel Prize winners in economics and experts in the world, they have different opinions on that. What's your thoughts? What's your feelings? What's your concerns?
It's very scary to think about what it will do to our society and culture, like this new way of I'm really not sure. One thing that I can maybe comment on is something I picked up on in a LinkedIn post. So I'm not sure where it comes from, whether it was a study or whatnot, but that many of the tech companies, they would get rid of their junior developers or not employ new junior developers, but keep the seniors. So there you might post, because the seniors could basically use AI and be productive more efficiently and would have less use of juniors. Anyway, so that poses the question: if we're not employing junior developers anymore, who will be the senior in 10 and 20 years if we're not educating people, letting them do apprenticeships, if we're not investing in the new generation? Who will be there to do the high level work in the future?
Yeah. Right. Like you're hollowing out your whole workforce, right? Maybe you can do this trick for like 10, 20 years. But if you have your generation coming up, it's really quite scary. I mean, you also will have young people being unemployed or people getting laid off. What everyone talks about, what is so different about what's happening now is, so it's a general purpose technology, can do lots of things, like we saw with steam power and with electricity. But now it's kind of like general purpose intelligence that can do lots of things. And all the past revolutions, they kind of, if you think about steam, if you think about electricity, it usually automated quite like work that was quite laborious, physical, repetitive. So if you think of the Industrial Revolution, Ford revolutionizing assembly line work, or cotton mills. It was all people. It was muscles replaced by machines and repetitive and dangerous work.
Yeah.
But now, because you have a general this technology that can seemingly think, seemingly write like humans, but more creatively and better than humans, and solve. I mean, there's a recent paper that Gemini 2.5 Pro won, if prompted correctly, won the International Math Olympiad. So it's getting better than the most intelligent human beings. It can replace our thinking. It can replace our creativity. And that's what, so it's really interesting. It goes not for the blue collar jobs, it goes for the white collar jobs. So the question is, and it's there's no good answers. Yeah, where does this leave us human beings?
Are we going
young workers?
Are we going back to blue collar, or is this also gonna get replaced by robotics soon? And if we're going to creative endeavors, not even sure about that, because you could make an argument that AI is good at that as well. So the only thing left is human connection. But can we all work in, who's gonna pay for the job? I have trouble conceiving such a society.
Yeah, I mean, there's, on the one hand, right, we could have this dystopia where AI and robots get better at most tasks, and you'll have a small minority of people still working that are kind of supervising or like the whiz kids that can that are the engineers and coders, and then a vast majority of people that are just out of jobs, and kind of the social political turmoil that would come from that. You could see that same scenario, and you could have a utopia. So most people don't have to work, or have to work much less, and don't have to do menial tasks and sit in front of computer all day and maybe answer emails they don't want to answer. But they could do creative stuff. They could work only 10 hours a week, and maybe we have so much productivity from machines and AI that, if you tax that properly, and the government makes so much money that anyone can be on universal basic income, that could be some sort of utopia. Yeah, maybe, question mark. But others argue maybe we have a world where we're not replaced. I mean, now we're doing a podcast. 20 years or 30 years ago, that was impossible. That was not a job. Many of the jobs that exist today were not even thinkable. I mean, if you go 100 years back, the kind of jobs that were available now, data scientists, computer scientists, Zoom calls and working remotely. I mean, these are all working. Yes. No, but also like just writing a book in word processing on a software, and the democratization of knowledge and being able to generate stuff. Who knows? Maybe we'll become creatives in this digital world. I don't know. It's scary though, and no one has the answer. But for what's the best way forward then for us, especially young people? I guess people listening that will be between 18 and 40, starting their career at university, junior level positions, maybe, at the still early stage of their career. Is there anything we can do to, if this whole revolution is coming, to try to stay on top, or not on top and not become, replaceable? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, the one obvious thing to do is to learn how to use AI properly, which might also entail not to use it too much, right? And
right,
to learn skills. But I've a really hard time predicting what the job market would look like in the future. Maybe it's becoming a good idea again to do blue collar jobs.
Right.
Maybe we will have less demand for knowledge workers in terms of amount, maybe that
right.
shrink.
So everyone listening, Marcel and I locked in on a PhD path. We might become irrelevant in 3 to 4 years. But if you still have a choice, think about picking up some
But I find it intensely hard to predict. So as you said, 20 years ago, we would not have known what jobs would exist.
What it look like. Yeah.
And maybe indeed it will go a little bit in the direction of utopia, as you said. Maybe the previous revolutions is what allowed us to have more free time and creative time and social welfare and all these things that we enjoy today. So maybe we're already approaching that.
Maybe. And to be fair, although we could have worked less, we still work a lot of hours. So that promise of some people like that, but some don't. I think many don't. And even the people that work a lot wouldn't mind working less. I think that's a good place to land on. A paradoxical, nuanced way. Use ChatGPT less. And large language models at the beginning, do the hard thinking yourself. But then do use it a lot. I think both things are very true. And maybe a way to think about it is AI as augmented intelligence. So you need to know what your skills are and what your capabilities are. And then if you use AI in the right way, it can augment your intelligence rather than just automate your intelligence. Some plays on words on what AI could mean. And I think striving for augmented intelligence rather than artificial or automated intelligence is a good way to think about. I think we're at the end of the podcast, and we have a closing tradition that we're starting with you.
Right.
So the closing tradition of this podcast, starting with you, Marcel, is what's an area in your life where you're seeking balance, and and what is an area in your life where you're chasing a breakthrough?
I think I'm quite an ambitious person, and I like to see breakthrough in my career. I like to see big steps. I like to be on the move, sort of. And when it comes to balance, a recent sentiment is that I should go to the gym again. It seems sometimes difficult to balance when you have all the travel and the work with a healthy routine.
Right. And well, best of luck with your scientific breakthroughs and with staying balanced physically. It's been a pleasure and honor and deep joy to have you as the first guest on this podcast. Probably no one is listening. If someone is listening, I hope they enjoyed it.
Oh, I certainly did. So it was worth it.
Thank you.
It was fun, really.
And thank you for inspiring me. I mean, the audience really should hear that. The very mic that you're seeing, or if you're listening, that you're listening to my voice from, was a birthday gift a year ago Marcel gave me. And the gift was not just a mic. The gift was, you have to use this mic. He knew I wanted to do a podcast. To create something, ideally a podcast episode. And only if, within a year, I used it towards that creative endeavor, would I be able to keep it? And it was a really thoughtful gift, and it was one of many things in which Marcel inspired me to try to go for that PhD, think about it, stretch myself creatively, and if I really wanted to go and do a podcast, to do it. So thank you for inspiring me on my intellectual journey, on my creative journey, and for being such an amazing friend and human being in my life. And I couldn't have thought of a better way of starting this podcast. And I hope this deeply resonated with everyone listening, and to many more. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm very proud of you for this step.
Thank you. Yeah. And I hope everyone enjoyed. I think that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.